I'd like to call this edition of the Santa Barbara Airport Commission meeting to order. May we have the roll call, please? Turn your mic on.
Karen Kahn,
Present.
Kurt Martin,
Here.
Craig Curry,
Here.
Carl Hopkins,
Here.
Dolores Johnson,
Here.
Bruce Miller,
Here.
Jim Wilson.
Here.
Congratulations, we have a full house. And we would like to congratulate our newly reappointed members, Carl Hopkins and Jim Wilson. Welcome. All right, we will now move on to the notices that on Thursday, December 14th, 2017 at 5 p.m., the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board at Airport Administration. The next item 2 is public comment. Any member of the public may address the Airport Commission on any subject within the jurisdiction of the Commission that is not scheduled before them that same day. The total amount of time for public comments will be 15 minutes, and no individual speaker may speak for more than 2. Do we have any speaker slips? Madam Airport Director.
No speaker slips, Madam Chair.
What a nice change. Moving on then to liaison reports. I'm advised that we do have a report from Councilmember Frank Hotchkiss, but it is electronic, and Hazel will read it to us.
That's right. Thank you, Chair. Frank says, please forgive my absence for this final Airport Commission meeting that I might attend as a Santa Barbara City Councilman, and accept my heartfelt thanks and congratulations for the great job that staff and you, the members of the Commission, have done to make the airport a real jewel in the crown of the city. I wish you continued success. I am sure it will come your way. Sincerely, Frank Hotchkiss.
Thank you, and we thank Frank for all of his good service, and for those of us who were there at the City Council meeting last week, very much appreciated his very appropriate comments and information provided to the rest of the City Council. With that, we move on to City of Goleta Liaison Council Member Michael T. Bennett.
No report.
No report. All right. Now we have the introduction of the Airport Operations Manager.
Yes, indeed, Madam Chair. I'm really pleased to introduce Aaron Keller. He has been selected as our Airport Operations Manager, not taking the place of Tracy Lincoln, because nobody can really take Tracy's place, but rather taking that position. He joined our staff on Monday, December 4th, and has been working to figure out how to deal with California fires. Since Aaron most recently served as the Assistant Airport Operations Manager from Portland International Jetport, so he's coming from one extreme of the United States to the West Coast, and on his first night of work, the fire started. So, Aaron, would you like to say a few words and introduce yourself, please?
Madam Chair, Commission, pleased to be here, and after 12 years in the industry, I'm hopeful my experience will be a benefit to the Santa Barbara Airport. Very pleased to be here, albeit the weather isn't exactly as I anticipated, at least over the last couple weeks, but certainly it's as none of us anticipated it. So nonetheless, I'm pleased to be here and look forward to working with you all in the future and the staff here on the airport. So thank you.
Great.
Okay.
Welcome. We're delighted to have you.
He's also a commercial pilot, so he fits right in with most of Commission.
Excellent. And that brings us to the consent calendar. Let's see if I can get this right. Do I have a motion to waive the reading of the minutes? And I'm sorry, first of all, I have to ask if there's any changes to the consent calendar.
No changes, Madam Chair.
Okay, so
I do have a correction to the minutes to have entered into the record.
Uh-oh.
The minutes state that the adjournment was at 7:27 p.m. on order of Carl Arcuri. I believe that was actually Craig Arcuri.
ah. Well,
Correction noted.
they have been noted. Do we have any other corrections?
I'll just.
Okay.
I move the calendar be accepted as stated.
And the reading of the minutes, I guess, has been discussed, so it doesn't. All right, do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the consent calendar is moved along. Next, we come to item number 7, administrative reports.
Deanna is quickly reestablishing communications here. But she will be providing a short presentation on something new with the airline operating permits. Are you ready?
I believe so, or unless we have to get a picture. Please wait. Please wait. Okay, amazing.
Don't you need to click it?
Oh yeah, I will. Okay, new airline operating permit. I literally had to redo the slide just 2 seconds ago. Okay, awesome. All right, and do I have a clicker?
There you
That
go.
is it. Alrighty. Good evening, Commissioners. The last meeting for the year. I think we all seem to be in good spirits. Yeah? I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our new airline operating permit. The thing that's different about this is that you've actually already approved the airline rates and charges earlier this year in March. So this actually is something a bit different this evening. It's really sort of the implementation of that in a little bit a different way than we've done in the past. Just to remind of what our different rates and charges look like. Our square footage fee for the airlines who rent terminal space, that's office space, ticket counters, and that kind of space. Their landing fees, which of course we adjust every year. Our boarding bridge use and our remain overnight fee is the same. It's $46. So if you use a bridge, you pay $46. If you ground board and are just remaining overnight, you would still pay that same $46. And the fuel flowage fee. So that really captures the types of revenues that we are getting from the carriers. Now, we used to do an airport operating permit, and I'm sure you are well aware of this, every year. We used to actually draft a new agreement. Besides just the negotiating with the carriers, we'd draft a new agreement and we would run it through, I should say, not only our process, but airlines have a significant amount of process as well. And so at the conclusion of the negotiations this year, late January, early February, the airlines actually suggested, and we were more than happy to agree, that we could do a 3-year permit instead of redoing it every year, do it for 3 years. And we would still negotiate the rates and charges every year as previous, but the body of the agreement would not change. The only thing that would change is that every year we would ask to approve the new rates and charges, and it would in effect be an amendment to the exhibit where those are spelled out. So more straightforward process. Now, of course, if it's going to be a 3-year agreement, the airlines put a little bit more scrutiny to it than in the past. And so, hence, we are here in December having completed that process. And really, it was a matter of the carriers going through each and every provision of the lease. Particularly, insurance requirements are always very sticky. And in previous years, if the carriers had some qualms about some provision in the permit, they would typically sign it and, and be at that. But now it's a 3-year agreement. They've decided they really wanted to be happy with just about everything in it. So it was a good effort for us because now we have what we think to be a great permit, and the carriers think so too. So they are going to be executing the agreement now. They all have it in their legal departments. It come back with signatures on it. For the most part, we've already been billing the airlines at the approved rates, so the fuel flowage fees, the landing fees. The only thing that they will be retroactively billed is for their leased space, and some of them, in a couple of cases, increased their space. Alaska increased space and American did, so we will retroactively bill them for that. But again, we'll start the process of at least negotiating the rates and charges again at the beginning of the year, but that agreement again will not change, so it should be more efficient for all of us. Yep. Any questions?
Any questions? I have a question. If an airline purely uses ground boarding facilities and, for example, does not stay overnight, then they do not pay any fee. They do not pay the $46 fee.
That's correct. That's correct.
That's
Thank you.
correct.
Yeah, and I believe that there was a point in time when one of the carriers was ground boarding and they had to remain overnight, and so that there wasn't a charge for that, and so that charge came along later. so that it would be more equitable between those carriers that overnighted at a boarding bridge. They didn't pay twice, but the fee was the same for both.
Thank you.
All righty. And we go back to the main slide.
You do.
Do I have to excuse
Technology.
myself? Because I tied on the city
All right,
tie-down?
go straight into that.
That's the next.
We're
You
off.
can ask
You're the
yourself.
city, title.
Okay, we're off
What?
to the races one more time.
You'll have to.
Okay, that
Do I
brings
have
us to
excuse
item
myself
8.
Since you are adjusting the city tie-down rates and I currently have a city tie-down?
Yes.
Yep.
You would just not vote, yeah, you could recuse yourself from that
Right.
particular, yes.
Leave the room or?
I think so.
To, yeah.
Sorry, you can't hear this, Carl.
Welcome to my world, Carl.
So now we move on to item 8, the fiscal year 2018 airport commercial industrial lease rates.
All righty. Good evening again, Commissioners, -1. Updated lease rates. So we have typically updated the lease rates every year, or at least we have come to you every year about the commercial industrial rates. The last time we did this was actually in, I believe, May of 2016. So we hadn't done it thus far this year. And in 2016, there were no changes made to those rates. So it was sort of high time to go out and look at the comparables and see where we are in the marketplace. So I talk a little bit about the rate proposals here. For the most part, on office, industrial R&D, storage, warehouse, land, we've gone up a little bit, 10% on just about everything except office space. Office space just up 5%, and that's just because there's not a tremendous amount of demand for office space right now, or there's more supply than there is demand, shall we say. But it does remain the case that industrial and storage, warehouse, and land is a scarce commodity in this area. So we felt like there was an ability to bump up the rates just a little bit. Now, mind you, we don't have a lot that is vacant. So, you know, that's another reason why perhaps this hasn't been quite so relevant, because without anything vacant, there hasn't been much to negotiate. But as of recent, we've have a number of leases that have come up, and really decided that it was time that we need to try to look at the comparables and try to get fair market value for just about everything we have. So I do want to mention here on that we have one rate here that is new that we have not had before, and that's a retail rate. And that is new because even though we have a couple of businesses within the commercial industrial property north of Hollister for the most part that you could consider to be retail, there hasn't been enough of it to really consider a retail rate. However, with the 6100 Hollister development coming on, there is retail space programmed into that. And so we felt like it was a good time to establish a retail rate that those retailers that we already have and those that may come along in the interim before the 6100 Hollister comes online, we sort of moved those folks into a retail bracket. And we've sort of firmly established an appropriate rate when that retail comes online. Again, looked at comparables there. This is at the lower end, definitely, because we're not we don't have a means of driving foot traffic. So, you know, Camino Real can charge $3.50 a square foot, whereas obviously we're going to be much lower than that. But it's a start. It's getting us on track for that, and so we'll have a good solid rate when that comes online. The tie downs. Again, not a lot of, and there's a missing one in there. It should be $130 a month. That would
Thank
be
you.
a great deal for Carl, but it's $130 a month. Currently, they're at $122 a month. We don't have a lot of vacancies there, so it's really it's only going to be relevant in the case where we have a new tie-down customer come in, where we'd like to start charging a little higher rate. And the reason for that is the comparables. We went out and looked at comparable airports, Camarillo, Oxnard, Palm Springs, Long Beach. I mean, airports that are fairly comparable to us, and their rates were quite a bit higher than $122 a month. So really, in comparison to those other airports I just mentioned, we're still on the lower side. But we only have 12 spaces, so And then parking, I'll just mention parking. Many of the tenants, as part of their lease agreements, they get 1 or 2 parking spaces as part of their lease agreement. But in some cases, folks want to lease more additional parking. That's been a screaming deal at $14 a space that hasn't been raised in probably 10 years at least. And a more appropriate market rate would be $25 a space for that. Yes, Karen?
Quick question that pertains here. How about hangar space rental? What is that, and is it going
The
up?
hangars, the T hangars are still at, I believe, $820 a month, thereabouts. Again, we have no vacancy there. If I think when we've looked at the comparables for that, we're still pretty much in the ballpark for that one, so we didn't see a whole lot of need to adjust that. And again, just not a lot of vacancy. We're not turning those over, so.
And Chair Khan, keep in mind that the T-hanger rental rate was based on our financial feasibility that we put together when we had the state loan. So in order to pay the loan off and make sure that we have the debt service covered, that's why those rates are set at that level. And they increase, I believe, 3% per year.
Okay, and when does the loan?
I think it's
And-
another 7 years. Is that right, Jeff? About 7 years from now. It was a 17-year loan
And there's no vacancies, Hazel? Okay,
at this time.
No.
No.
great,
Mhm.
great.
We don't have a long waiting list. I mean, I think in the past there has been a long waiting list for T hangars. We don't have that either, but we also don't have any vacancies, so.
So one could encourage people who are interested to put their name on the list. There's
Yes.
hope.
Yes, and we actually, during this year, we did have a couple of vacancies, probably 3 different vacancies, and those were snapped up right away, and in some cases, they were tie-down tenants. I know one signature tie-down tenant took a T-hanger, so they do get snapped up pretty quickly once they're vacant.
Thank you.
All right.
I have a question on the retail rate. So what's the impact of that new rate on some of the existing retail tenants?
Well, we don't have any existing retail tenants that are really coming up soon for lease renewal. We have one perhaps in the pipeline. We basically, I mean, we have to look at where they're at currently and sort of ease them into it. I mean, we need to take into consideration that we can't all of a sudden jump up our rates on something just because we have a retail rate all of a sudden. But so it's something that we'll get people worked into gradually, and that's really kind of the intent of starting it now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to the director's report.
Thank you. Just a few items to touch on. As we had
Maybe somebody could fetch Carl back.
Carl
There he comes.
Carl
Collar.
Or Craig Hopkins.
Yeah. Thanks for coming back. Kara Khan, as you and I were talking about before the meeting, we were discussing in January the election chair and vice chair, and then we would also do subcommittee assignments. So, okay. And then going back to the prior item on the rates and charges, Airport Commission needs to recommend approval.
Okay. So
Carl came back too soon.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You can leave now. Sorry.
should we ask him to step out one more time, or can he be present during the voting?
You can just abstain.
Is there a closet we could put him
You
in?
can't look at us and make faces.
Give him a hat and put him in the corner.
All right. Do we have a motion to recommend approval of the rates to the city council as stated for the fiscal year 2018?
So moved.
And,
Second?
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The rates are recommended. Thank you.
Thanks for catching
Now we
me.
can rejoin our 7th member, thank you, and our director's report.
All right, as we were discussing, keep in mind the subcommittee assignments and then chair and vice chair, and we'll do that in January, at our January meeting. I'd just like to point out, once again, I'm just so excited about the November passenger traffic up year-to-date over the same period last year, 12.13%. It's just makes me feel really good. Alaska's 25% up over the same month last year. And United is up 12.75% over the same month. And American continues to grow at 5.6. So we're really pleased about that. I'd like to just point out that Deanna and Tracy and Tom have been working very hard on parking management contract. We had 6. They did an RFP and had 6 proposals submitted, and interviews have been completed as of today. And now they're doing the due diligence and doing reference checks and evaluating each proposal based on the criteria that was established in the RFP. And we'll be coming to Airport Commission in January with a report on parking. And hats off to Andrew Vermont, who did a stellar job at City Council on December 12th with the master plan and the environmental certification of the master plan. He did an outstanding job, and even though it took us 6 years to get there, we're really pleased to have that accomplishment at the end of this year. It's been an amazing process, and we're ready to implement now. So,
Yes, I'd like to second that. I've been through the process from the very beginning and was at a number of the meetings where Andrew presented, including this last one. He has always been the ultimate professional. He's done a phenomenal job throughout all 700 and some odd pages of the EIR and all of the other documents. He presented extremely well. He answered the questions quite well and quite clearly, and it's quite obvious that he's extremely knowledgeable in this area. And I think without his talents, we'd probably be at least another 6 years.
And I'd like to encourage the commissioners who weren't able to attend the last meeting, although I've already watched it. Our last commission meeting had some very interesting information to be viewed, and you can see that online, as well as the city council meeting at which we had at least 3 commissioners.
there.
So the other 4 of you who are interested, it was a very good presentation and very well said, and very nicely went together so that all of the issues were easily understandable because the presentation order worked very well.
Good, good. I was also quite taken aback when the visual of all of the meetings that have taken place during that period of time. You know, I remember some of them and I think, oh, well, we did that. But when you see an 8.5 page of paper with one line after another of meetings and presentations and council meetings, and it really was an open process, and hats off to Andrew for assisting in that leadership. So I'm very pleased about that. Also, equally pleased to tell you that our plans are out for 6100 Hollister. It'll be a smaller project than even the first phase, but it is out. We've had 2 pre-bid meetings. Because of the fires down south, a lot of contractors are from the Ventura area, and so we hosted 2 pre-bids, and the bids are due on January 23rd. So that'll be right after Airport Commission meeting, but I'll be sure and send out an email to everybody to let you know how that turns out. And then hopefully have Leaf do a presentation in February on that project. Similarly, on 495 South Fairview, previously known as the Ampersand Hangars, you'll recall that I said last month that we had a settlement agreement. So for a smooth transition of that property back to the airport on May 9, 2018. And that property has been without electrical power since August 2nd, 2016. However, Leaf has that project as well and is working with Smith Engineering to develop the electrical plans needed so that we can go forward and get the switchgear changed out and get the property up to code. As you know, it does sit in the floodway, and so the switchgear has to be brought up to 4 feet above base elevation. So he's building a little platform for it as well. So that's underway, and we have also had some core samples taken of the ramp I'm sorry, it's called Apron these days, Apron, so that we can get our plans together to submit for an AIP grant so that we can't do it all at one time, but we'll do strategic replacement a little bit at a time. So we are making plans to get that property back and actually take care of it. So with that, I don't have any other updates unless you have questions of staff.
The
Any
runway 725 overlay project?
Is ready to go, and I think right now we're getting all of the submittals in, and it's due to start in April and be completed in June. And we have notified the airlines of that.
And the Terminal Solar, do we have any?
Jeff, do you have an update?
Not a lot of updates since last meeting. They've been to ABR twice and received comments. They also have submitted for their DART review. So they do have a design and moving forward with design and refining their design, so that's encouraging.
Thank you.
And then I had two questions. At 6100, what's the status of the roof? Do we know what the status of the roof is? Do we know what the status of the roof is over there? in
You mean
terms of-
495 South
I mean
Beverly?
495, yeah.
We haven't put the roof on yet.
It'll be very
Well, that
nice.
explains a lot.
I don't know exactly the status of the roof. I know that some repairs have been made over the years, but I don't have an update. We will be doing that too, doing a walkthrough. Jeff and our engineers will be doing that so that we can get a fresh idea of the status of the facility.
And do you know, I know that at least one of the hangars, but do all the hangars have the fire suppression foam system or just one?
I don't know specifically. I
Okay.
also know that one hangar does. I'm not sure about the rest.
Okay. And then unrelated to that, the charts on the back of the director's report showing fuel flowage, they're separated out with Jet A and Avgas. I don't recall when we the last meeting approved Signature's acquisition of the MAG self-serve fuel. When does that take effect, or when does that happen? And the reason I'm asking that is, would these numbers then, would the orange bars then get collapsed into Signature Avgas, or will they stay separate because it's a self-serve facility, or do we even know?
To answer your first question, we have the consent to assignment in our legal department, and I believe our attorney's trying to get that out by the end of the month or at the very beginning of next month. Is that correct, Deanna? And secondly, I think we would continue to have the self-serve fuel reported separately, because it is something that we have a history on, and it'd be easy to report back
Yeah,
on it.
terrific. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any other comments?
Okay.
Well, then, if there are no objections, I pronounce that we are adjourned.
Wish you all a happy holiday.
Yes.
Yeah.